call to order this meeting of School Board 162 and ask that the clerk please call the roll.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Here.
Mrs. McCray,
Present.
Mrs. Gordon, Mr. Bean.
Present. We have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is communications, announcements, and schedules. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a wonderful, wonderful week. We just finished our retreat and we're preparing for the children on Monday. So that's a good thing. All classes begin on Monday on the 21st, and in my report, I'll talk about some specifics about enrollment and transportation and food service. But we're doing something different. And that is on September 2nd, we were invited to go to the HBCU Classic at Soldiers Field, and we do invite you to come with us if you would like to go with almost 300 of your best little friends. So we will be going on September 2nd. It looks like an all-day event. The Southland Band was invited to perform, but then we decided it would be only fair to take the Huth, Illinois Band. And so they will be going with us. And then the Dancing Lady Eagles asked to go, and then parents are going with us. So we started out as 9 buses, and now we're probably going to be 10, 11, or 12 buses, but we're moving in that direction. And you know how difficult, Mr. President, it is to park at Soldiers Field. It won't be difficult for us because we're in the big yellow buses. So September 2nd, and I will give everyone details when they desire it. But there'll be no school on Monday, September 4th in observance of Labor Day. But then we start our open houses, and I'd like to bring to the attention of the board the Zoom open houses, the hybrid open houses. We're just having open houses this time. The family will be back together and we'll be in person. So on Huth, September 6th, Indiana, Richmond Square, Madison, Arcadia, Illinois, and leading us out is going to be the SALK with Dr. Morgan and Mrs. Hughes on August 30th. And it's just such a wonderful thing. But our next board meeting will be September 19th, and that's after we open. So I will be able to give you an update on not only the opening, but our progress as we move forward, which will be on the 19th at 6:30.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Madam Superintendent. The next item on the agenda is entitled Audience to Visitors. This is an opportunity for any member of the audience to direct a question to the board on agenda items. And if you have a general question at the end of the session, you'll be able to address the board. Are there any members of the audience who'd like to address the board with respect to items on the agenda? Hearing none, I will then entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
move to approve the consent agenda dated August 15th, 2023, and every item contained therein.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call,
Mr.
please.
President, if I
Yeah.
could please, under policies, this is something I've been waiting for over the years, and Mr. Hall is here, so I would ask him to address this. But you're well aware that we receive requests from various and sundry people to attend Madison 162. The policy, the law in the past has always been that our board could consider it. However, anyone who does not live within our attendance areas would have to pay tuition. Our tuition is actually $13,000 a child. So that's huge. We've never had over the years anyone to accept our invitation and pay attendance. No, I stand corrected. Mr. Hall, I want to remember several years back, by virtue of a court law, when court ruling, however, when a couple was separated, the judge did rule that each of them had to pay a segment of the tuition, but that's the only time that that has happened, because people think that you can simply go to a public school outside of your attendance area, or they think that our tuition is going to be similar to that of private schools, and it's actually much, much more. It costs a lot of money to educate children and to do it well. But Mr. Hall, a new law passed, and we're very, very happy about it because we do have a couple of people in line already. So what does it involve?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Yes, we are excited by this new law. The legislature, I think, in order to assist districts in attracting good people and keeping good people, recognize that for a wonderful school district such as 162, one of the best perks, my word, is if we could allow our employees to enroll their children here in our district schools, even if they are non-residents. And that's exactly the law that was approved by the legislature, saying that our board could adopt a policy saying that it was authorizing the superintendent to grant requests to allow our employees' children to attend our district schools without having to pay tuition. And the law is very specific regarding what constitutes a child who can attend the school. It says a child who may receive such a tuition waiver means a district employee's biological child, adoptive child, foster child, stepchild, or a child for whom the employee serves as legal guardian. So the legislature now has given the board authority to say that our employees may enroll their children in our schools without having to pay tuition, even if the employees do not live within the district. Again, I believe that the reason for this, as discussed among the legislature, was that it would allow people to come to our districts, to stay in our districts, even if they had school-age children, and would encourage them to be employees that would remain here. So that's the reason that I bring that Dr. Davis authorized bringing the policy to you tonight. That's the change. It's to allow the enrollment of the children of employees who fit the definition under the statute. In the policy, it is stated that each such authorization would only be for 1 year. And then it would have to be reapproved for the following year to make sure that everything goes as it should. It also requires that the superintendent would find that there was space for the student who was seeking enrollment and that it was in the best interest of the district. So it provides those protections so that we as a district can make sure we're doing what makes sense for us as a district. But it is an exciting thing to think that our employees, who are so important to providing the education here in District 162, would actually be able to allow their children to benefit from those educational opportunities as well. So that's the reason for bringing this policy to you this evening.
And Mr. President, if I could bring to your attention that during COVID, as you're well aware, our teachers taught from within their individual classrooms. But the question arose several times, what about our children? Because they would be their own personal children would be left at home. So the board did authorize us to hire people to supervise, and I don't want to say babysit because they were up to 14 years of age, but we'll just say babysit those children within our building. And I think it relieved a lot of stress on the teachers that during their preparation period and their lunch periods, they could go and have lunch with their own children, but their own children were safe and sound. But what I thought was interesting, because remember, everyone was using iPads or Chromebooks, that we had all of these children from different districts, and we were communicating within their environment. And some of the superintendents would call and said, where are these children? And I said, well, they're in a school, and that's where they're responding to the questions, et cetera. But they had a great deal of help from teachers who were there in the school. And so I just think it was to everyone's benefit. As you know, we're over 80% female. And I don't think we would have been able to get all of the teachers to leave home and come had we not provided services. But I do have 2 inquiries about coming into our district. So we'll see what the will of the board is. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Can you let us know what public act is that, or what piece of legislation it is? exactly?
Sure. In fact, I have a copy I'd be happy to give you, I'll make a copy for all the board members and mark the page so that everyone can see it. If that might make things a little bit
Yeah,
easier.
that'd be great. Also, just a question about, is there a are there a max number of students that are allotted in that? piece of
No,
legislation?
it is completely at the discretion of the district. Again, this is not something that the district is required to do. It's something that the district is authorized to do. So if Dr. Davis would find that we were at our limit, or that for whatever reason, educationally, it didn't make sense for our district to allow in students, it would be, she would exercise the discretion to say, we're not able to do this at this time. So it's not a requirement, it's an authorization.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And before the end of the meeting, I'll make sure to give everyone on the board a copy of the legislation.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Any
Mrs.
further
Hutchinson, I
questions?
would think that this would be somewhere between 5 and 10 ask at the very most.
There's been a motion and a second and discussion on the motion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
The matter has been adopted. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to invite all of the board because everyone else that's sitting here will be with us on Thursday morning. We have an opportunity we have not had since August of 2019. We've been doing virtual openings with all of the teachers. Our new field house has afforded us the opportunity to meet on a one-on-one basis and everyone in the same room. And I remember the energy and the synergism and just the enthusiasm. And so I do invite you to join us. We'll be serving breakfast at 7:30 this Thursday. At 8:30, we will start our program, and it gives us a chance to acknowledge our teachers, but not just the teachers. Historically, what we've always done is to not only invite our teachers, but the parapros, our clerical staff, our janitors, everyone is there in the same room. And so if you please send me an email if you desire to come, and certainly we will be very welcome. But what I'd like to do is to begin talking about our finances and our budget. So Mr. Englert, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Mr. President, members of the board, in front of you on the dais, there is a copy of the proposed tentative 23-24 budget. There's no action on this tonight. This is for you to take home and peruse. It will be available on the district's website this week. It will be on display for a month, and at the September meeting, the board will be asked to vote on it after a public hearing is held. So same process we've used in the past, same process as we just used a couple months ago with the amended budget for 22-23. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights with you. So looking at the budget, and on that document you have in front of you, you have a narrative there, but behind the narrative, you'll see a chart. And it has some purple columns on the left-hand side, some green columns on the right-hand side. So I'm going to go through those in just a moment, but I want to highlight from operations, we're projecting about a $328,000 surplus. And we do project that the district will have a financial profile score of financial recognition again for this upcoming year. So the budget is broken down, and this is determined by ISBE actually, but it's broken down into funds. And if you want to think of funds as really separate business units of the school district, so each fund has its own revenues and expenditures, its own sources and uses, depending on the type of use of those funds. So we have the operating funds, and I'll get into the detail in a minute on what those are. And that's really the general day-to-day operations of the school district. And that's really where ISBE derives their financial profile scores when it's analyzing a school district's finances. The other are the non-operating funds, and I'll go through those in a second. So just looking at the operating funds and going back to that chart you have on the left-hand side, those funds that are highlighted in purple there, education, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash. Those are your 4 operating funds. Education is really anything having to do with teacher salaries, textbooks, administration, special ed, anything having to do with the education itself. So that's by far the largest fund of the school district. Operations and maintenance really is about the care of buildings, so utilities, custodial costs, general maintenance on the buildings. Transportation obviously is transportation of students, and working cash is really like a savings account. That's a savings account of the district essentially. So non-operating funds, again, not having to do with the day-to-day operation of the school district. You have debt service. This is payment on the district's outstanding debts. Social Security, IMRF, sometimes referred to as retirement funds. So these are the funds for the district's responsibilities for retirement of staff. Construction, and then the tort fund is not something we actually use anymore. It's something that the district used many years ago. It's still open. There's about maybe $100 that runs through there, and that's about it. So this is that chart you have there in front of you, just kind of recapping what those operating funds are and showing you for each of those columns, education, operations and maintenance, transportation, working cash, what those roll up to. And that's, you see a highlight there. That's where we get that number of the $328,000 projected surplus. Again, this is the non-operating funds. These are really, you don't really add these together. They're really in silos. And so just looking at those debt service, IMRF, Social Security, and the last one there, tort, you can see slight surpluses. Construction fund, you see the large deficit. It's not a deficit that you should be concerned about. It just means that the expenditures that are in that fund, the sources of those expenditures are really leftover funds from this year. And in addition to that is working cash funds being used for construction. And this is just a recap of both of those there. This is an interesting chart I want to highlight. So we talk about this every year. We look at the percentage of how the district's operations are funded. And in past years, we talked about 50% or more of the funding coming from property taxes. And slowly over the past few years, that number has come down. And what you see there in the deep red is it says 41%. And a lot of that really is the result of those property tax relief grants the district has been receiving. We project the district will receive that again for this upcoming year too, based on the numbers and the formulas that they use. And so you see on the purple there on the left, that's state funding, and we're up to 40%. There was times a couple years ago, it was 30%, 32%. So that's increased steadily over the years too. The other one I want to highlight is the purple there, 10% federal funding. That's about what we used to see pre-COVID. So once COVID hit, we started to see a lot of federal funds coming in, ESSER money, and so a lot of other grants. And those will be starting to close out here in the 23-24 school year. Not much different here. This is the expenditure side of the equation. 68% salaries and benefits. That's typical in most school districts. The 17% there in purchase services, that's mostly transportation and food service. Okay, just a couple things I want to highlight in terms of changes. So if you're looking at the operating revenue, we break it down between local, state, and federal. And on local, you'll see the increase there from the property tax revenue. That really has to do with new property increases in the CPI, but a lot of it really has to do with timing of when Cook County's property taxes come in. There's a 28% decrease in replacement taxes this year, even though it's local funding. It actually comes from the state of Illinois and has to do with an old law based on the income of businesses in the state of Illinois. And then other local funds, about an $88,000 increase. State funding, we talked about the increases in evidence-based funding from the property tax relief grant. So some of that 3.9 million there is from that, about 2 million of it is. And the remaining roughly 1.9 million is just a reallocation of those funds into the operating funds. Offsetting that, we have the 21st Century Grant that is going away at the end of this year. Excuse me, at the end of the 22-23 school year it went away. And looking at the federal funds again, we have those, you can see ARP ESSER grant. We're starting to wind down with that grant now. The school climate grant expired at the end of 23. And IDEA, although we're projecting a decrease here, I actually don't think it will be a decrease. We just don't have our carryover numbers yet. Moving on, salaries on the expenditure side, up about 5.8%. Most of that's contractual increases, and we have some positions that were contracted in prior years that are now in-house. Benefits about 11.5%, 6.2% of those benefits are from the increase in health insurance rates, and again, with some additional positions. A couple other increases I want to highlight. The big one, of course, that we've been talking about all year is student transportation. That's probably the largest increase you see in the budget there. Also, there was a science adoption this year, which was a significant cost. And so you see increases in the textbook budget for that. And on the decrease side, of course, we talked about those two grants. And the district did bid out its waste disposal and saw significant savings from that. So I did want to highlight that. Couple other things, looking at that construction fund, you'll see $5.3 million. That's just finishing up the projects from the summer. We do have some money in there for media center renovations. And then we do have $100,000 for unforeseen building expenses and another $400,000 just for unknown expenses we may encounter that we just don't know about right now. Couple things I want to highlight to just watch for the future. Property tax collections have really been stabilizing. I'd say stabilizing right around 89 to 90%. So we budgeted 89, but it's somewhere in that range is how it's been falling the last few years. We have been informed by Cook County that property tax bills will be late again this fall, not as late as it was last year. So that's good news. They're projecting that bills will go out November 1st with a December 1st due date. So we probably will start to see money right at the beginning of November on when those bills go out. The use of ESSER funds, we talked about that's going away. Shouldn't affect operations too much. We were very purposeful in how those funds were being allocated. And the last thing I'll just highlight is the state of Illinois' finances. We haven't talked about that in a while. The last several years, the state of Illinois has been doing pretty well because it's been receiving a lot of federal funding, and a lot of that's starting to diminish. So it is something we'll have to put back on our radar. So just timeline tonight, this is just mere discussion. The budget is on display for 30 days. Again, no action tonight. When we reconvene in September, there will be a public hearing and a board vote. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me between now and that time. Or if you have any questions this evening, happy to take those as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the board?
Thank you, Mr. England. In front of you, board members, you have the 2023-24 162 handbook. And we are prepared next week to send them home to our parents, which has policies, rules and regulations, etc. And we will be asking for a usual acknowledgement by virtue of a signature. But these are stored in the warehouse. We're just waiting for little angels to come back, and we will send that home. But one of the things that we did in COVID was to shift the enrollment process from the individual schools to the district office. And I'm very happy that we did because there is no issue that we can't resolve. Lately, in the last enrollment period, we've been having quite a few parents who do not speak English. But in this building, we have at any one time 5 teachers who are fluent in Spanish. And we did have one child that's was fluent in French. But remember, we do teach French here, so it hasn't been an issue. But in addition to that, our special education staff, as well as our homeless liaison, is located in the building. So there's really nothing that we cannot resolve. Just to bring to the attention of the board, we have not in the past 3 years been collecting fees. Remember, prior to COVID, there was a registration fee. So there's absolutely no reason for a parent not to bring a child because we have not returned to requiring fees. And you saw in the presentation of our budget that we're stable. And so we don't want to put any more pressure on the community, but we do want them to bring the children in. So we're in the process of enrolling, and Mr. Marvin Talley, would you tell the board exactly where we are, please?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Good evening, board. The document that you see in front of you on the screen, that 2,037, that number represents the number of students that are completely registered in the district. And I know that we're streaming right now, so I like to say for those that are watching that please, we love to see you on Monday morning. So go ahead and go online, as Dr. Davis mentioned. For our returning parents, it'll probably take less than 5 minutes or less to complete online registration. On your way in today in the media center downstairs, you probably saw a lot of parents and kids. Most of those are new to our district. And so as Dr. Davis mentioned, we have been simultaneously doing both. Many of our elders know that they can come in, we can assist them with the online process, but many of our families have done just well in terms of the online process. And we continue to bring new families in each and every day. So Mr. Lights, if you would go on. And so this is the projection that Mr. Engler put together for the board. And as you can see, we're projected at 2,422 students. And it gives you the breakdown per school as well as per grade level. Mr. Lights. This next document represents the actual number of new families to our district. And one thing I like to say is that as our families continue to come in, Dr. Davis, is that with a steady flow, it's just indicative in terms of the great job that 162 is doing. I know for a fact, and meeting so many different families, the first thing you look at in terms of having school-age children is how well is the district doing. And so as many families are coming in, we're doing a really good job. So really proud of that. So again, this document that you see in front of you represents the new families to the district. I'd be more than happy to take any questions from anybody.
Well, if I can bring something to your attention, you're well aware that historically, the school with the largest enrollment has been the Huth, our middle school. And when I first came, the Huth housed 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And that was interesting with over 900 children in that building. But we did, as a board and as an administration, reorganize because we felt that the 6th graders were really just too young to rotate classes every 45 minutes. But historically, it still has been the larger school. But if you look at the projected enrollment, you'll see that we anticipate that the largest school in terms of enrollment this year is going to be the Arcadia. The second largest school is going to be the Illinois, and the Huth now is the third school. But I'm mentioning that to you because if you look at the students who are new to the district, and you see 123, I go downstairs every day, and what I see are the tiny tots
Yes.
with their parents who are enrolling. So we're bottom heavy. That's not an issue for us, but it is an issue that we have to acknowledge and begin to plan for as they move up. And so I'm hopeful that the Arcadia will not get any larger than this, but in 2020, Mr. Engler shared that with me today, they were at 560. But look at the 45 students that registered and we continue to register, and the numbers that are as they come in, because we're looking at not only those returning students, but we're looking at those that are new to the district. So at this point, we are anticipating that the Arcadia and the Illinois will be our two largest schools, but the Madison is beginning to grow also. And look at that 58, Mrs. Houston, that enrolled in the past week. And if you compare that to the analysis, we were looking at 396 very possibly, because these are small children that are coming in, and we're grade level centers. So we might be looking at the Madison going over 400, which it has not done in the past 20 years. So I don't know if there are questions about that, but just to bring this to your attention, little tiny children coming in with their parents enrolling. So I think it's very interesting. But Mr. Talley, thank you for persevering and we'll continue to enroll. But we are, board members are enrolling out of the district office simply because we can answer any question and it does not put pressure on our individual schools. But I ask you to take these enrollment forms home and study them, because it is the future of the district as the children move up through the district.
And
Thank
Doc,
you.
if you don't mind, I actually need to go back to registration, if you don't mind.
No, sir, thank
Okay,
you,
all
but
right.
thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.
We mentioned transportation, and transportation, of course, is Dr. Rob Tomich. But Mr. Lights, I asked him to do something that we have not done. And that is Bruce Barr, who is the owner and general manager of our new company, Safeway, indicated that he was going to lease land at 217th and Central, right down the street, 5 minutes away. I could not have been more ecstatic. But then, because we believe in information and verification, do we have any pictures of what that, we do? Okay. So we know that close to Dr. Leatherwood, verification, that's a wonderful thing, that they're very close to us. And so, Dr. Tomich, you can even give some examples, because the yellow buses were rolling in today, but there's some other things that are unique to Safeway that you shared with me. If you would share them with the board, please.
Good evening, board. Yes, I think from a year ago, we are in a much better, much stronger situation from a busing situation right now. It has been fantastic working with Safeway. A couple of things I just wanted to highlight is the fact that when we look at the number of routes, and we just got this a couple of days ago, is that we have 54 routes right now. It is the exact same number as last year. So what we're doing is still fleshing out the routes to make sure that there's a balance of numbers per bus. Right now, we have a couple buses over 50, and we want to get that underneath 50. Some buses are about 30 or 40 students. So those are the little pieces of the puzzle right now, the details that we want to make sure that we're ready for Monday of next week. From the standpoint of location, it is fantastic that we have a terminal that's literally 6 minutes away. You go west on Sauk, you go north on Central, and we can have quick meetings with the leadership team over there. If we have any issue with the buses, they're only 5 minutes away. In the last 20 years, that terminal's been 30 minutes away. So little things like that are going to help us run things a lot more efficiently. Next steps right now is for us at the end of this evening, parents that have not registered, parents that have not registered by this evening will not have transportation the first couple of days of the school year, because we want to make sure that things are very tight. They're scheduled. They're structured to making sure that bus drivers know exactly who they're supposed to be picking up. We've been sending a lot of robocalls out in the last couple of weeks, and that's why we have a lot of people that have registered too at this point. So I just wanted to reinforce that piece. More than likely, if they register on Wednesday or Thursday this week, which we classify as late registration, we will get them busing by mid next week. So that's what we plan on doing. So I wanted to highlight that parts. Something new this year though, student safety program. So Safeway has a online portal that has videos for parents and also for staff members. They are sectioned off between pre-K to second grade, third to fifth grade, and also sixth grade to 12th grade. Each age range there has a video that focuses on, and there's actually 3 videos: how to evacuate a bus, the safety rules like danger zone and that on a bus, and also bullying and teasing on the bus. And I think at this point, Mr. Lights, if we can just give a little example of one of the animated videos, and this would
Okay,
obviously
son,
be.
what's the first rule?
Don't be late. I should always be at the stop at least 5 minutes early.
What's the first rule?
Don't be late. I should always be at the stop at least 5 minutes early.
And never ever
And
bang on the
second?
side.
Never
How about
run
the
after
third?
the bus. No run.
And never ever bang on the side.
How
How about the third?
I don't know that word. You know I don't read good.
You're doing
I
fine.
know that
That's
word.
no roughhousing.
You know I don't
like
read
when you and
good.
your dad
You're
wrestle in the
doing fine.
playroom. That's no
And number
roughhousing.
4 is,
stand
like
in
when
a
you
single
and your
file.
dad wrestle
That
in the
means a
playroom.
straight line. When the bus
Number
arrives.
4 is,
stand in a
I know
single
number
file.
5.
That means a straight
Always
line.
stay out
when
of
the
the
bus
danger
arrives.
zones.
Wow,
I
very
know number
good.
5. I mesmerize that one. Always stay out of the danger
You
zone.
Memorize.
Wow, very good.
What I said.
I mesmerized that
Okay.
one.
How about the
mean,
rest?
Memorized it.
Number
What I
6.
said. Keep
Okay.
10 feet away till
How
the
about the
driver's
rest?
side. Number 6.
Till the
Keep 10
driver
feet
says
away
it's
till the
okay to get
driver's
out.
side.
Close enough.
Sign.
Number
Till
7.
the driver says it's okay
Board
to
in
get
a
out.
straight line.
Close enough.
Number 8.
Number
If I
7.
drop something, I
Board
should
in a
tell the
straight
driver.
line.
And
number 8.
9.
If I drop something,
exciting.
I should tell the driver.
Wait.
And
Oh,
number 9.
exiting.
When exciting.
When exiting, walk 10 feet away before I turn to go home.
Exiting.
Very
When
good, Tommy.
exiting,
You got them
Walk
all.
10 feet away before I turn to go home.
Okay.
Very good, Tommy. You
I
got
think
them
I remember
all.
all the rules.
Okay. I think I remember all the rules.
All right, so that's just a little example there of one of the videos there. So that's obviously for our little ones. So who do we expect to actually roll this out here in the next couple of days? We plan on sending this portal here to the parents as well, so they can view this with their children. But we will definitely have our staff actually roll this out with each of the different grade levels there, just to make sure that they're comfortable and confident. So they're going to show the video. They're going to have a Q&A time with them as well. And they got like nice structured lesson plans for the staff to follow. So that's what we plan on doing for next week or for the next couple of weeks. So next steps here in the next few days is firm up our routes, make sure that the people that have registered that we email their bus transportation information, what their stop is and their times. And then we're also going to give our leadership teams that information so they can just sort of help flesh it out as well to see if they see anything that can be improved on. Any questions?
Questions about transportation. I do want to mention, because, we sit in a school and doesn't really matter what the name of the school is, but we sit in a school. Beautiful new buses pulled up and I thought, oh my goodness. So I've been pleased, number one, with Dr. Tomage's leadership, but with the interaction of the staff. They actually came over here and did staff development for their drivers. Pleased also that they recognize that we're a different segment of the south suburbs. And we want to thank the leadership of the village of Matheson. They expedited and helped us to get the bus company a permit. So things are coming together. But I did want to announce, because we are streaming, field trips, teachers and parents, field trips. I do think children learn a lot, not just in the classroom, but having the opportunity to go places. They have more than enough buses, more than enough bus drivers. But you remember the presentation, they are paying their bus drivers more, paying them for 6 hours a day, offering insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So at this point, we are extremely pleased with the preparation and the last 2 days, but a semester is not 2 days. But it appears that we will have a much smoother school year. So that's where we are. But we did want to see the buses, and we own drones. And so, but we got permission. We got permission to go over and take, because we wanted to see all of these wonderful buses. Just to remind the board that we are the largest client that they have. And not to say that we don't care about everyone else, but we do want 66 buses on the street for our family, so that our children will be able to get to school on time. We'll be able to have field trips. We'll be able to play sports and not worry about how the children get home. So that is what we see at this point, but I will give you an update at the next meeting, because we will have been with them for 4 weeks by that time. Cleaning. First of all, oh my goodness. All right, let's not start with cleaning. Let's start with the
Mr.
new
President.
fence at the SOC.
Can
And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Dr. Davis. I'd just like to build off what you said, and a quick question to Dr. Tomich. First, do we have feedback from the summer? Just if you could refresh your memory on how we got through the summer transportation. Was it a mixture, or was it, did it include the new?
No, we were with our former bus company during the summer.
Got you. So any
And-
updates will be from the these initial 4
Right.
weeks.
The other issue is, some of the other districts were not open. And, we went, how many buses did we have on the street as compared to how many usually we
I
have?
think we had about 20 or 25 routes, but Kicker only worked at about 30% of what they actually have during the school year. So if they had 100 routes during the school year and only had 80 drivers, the summertime is not a problem at all because there's no other districts in our neighboring area that actually had any kind of, any kind of really in-depth summer program. So it really wasn't an issue.
So we were able to, close that out without incident because
Yes.
of the lower requirements.
Correct.
And Dr. Davis, you mentioned field trips are back. I like that. That's a headline. And then
Actually, teachers are, aware of this and the field trip requests have already started to come in because they're pre-planning.
Fantastic. That having been said, you spoke to it a little bit, so I just would like to bring it home, Dr. Tomich, about special event capacity. We talked about that during the contracting time frame. Because we're a district that has special events, we kind of do that. And so between those requests for field trips and then the things that come up that we respond to, can you speak a little bit about, just any more about their capability to take on special events that'll happen throughout the year that will need to have bus capacity before? Because that was, a
Yeah.
big problem with the previous.
I'm positive in saying that it was one of the selling points in going with Safeway because they guaranteed that if we had or if we had a need for any buses going to any kind of sporting events such as track, and if they had to leave at 2:30, there will not be any problem at all. Their workforce right now, I think they're at about 145 drivers. And the last that I heard is that they had 93 routes that they had to provide service for. There's a number of those drivers that are just there for any kind of day trips, school trips, and also for afternoon sporting events as well. So that was that was the icing on the cake essentially there to make sure that we went with them. So there was no interruption at all. All the volleyball, basketball games, anybody that has to leave by 2:30 is not going to be a problem at all.
Very good. Thank you.
And Mr. Johnson and the rest of the board, today, when I was outside of a bus driver said, "Hi, Dr. Davis," and I looked up and there was our Kicker bus driver that we've had for the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I said, "Well, how are you?" He said, "Just fine." I said, "Okay, good." And I didn't say anything other than that. So I know what is happening behind the scenes.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. But thank you, Dr. Tomich. New fence at the SOC. You'll remember that the police chief at Richton Park asked that we take down the fence that was there and also not have vines and other decorative kinds of things that meant that they couldn't see what was going on inside of the parking lot and where the children play and the school in general. And so we had planned on doing that. What we didn't plan on doing is experiencing a car speeding down the street. We were told from the skid marks at 62 miles an hour. For some reason, flipping over 3 times into our playground. We didn't anticipate all of that. So this is our new fence. And we requested of the county that we be, because we were not aware until just recently that Sauk Trail is controlled by the county. We requested that we be allowed to install cement barriers on the side of the fence. And so we're now negotiating with them. It's a process. This is the county. So we're in step 2 of the process, but we even offered to pay for this. Because why would we think, even though this is an extremely attractive fence, that it would prevent someone that was recklessly driving? And because we were closed, we were fortunate, but the fence is there because we're getting ready to open. But we do have a request in through our commissioner that we be allowed to build a cement barrier.
Mr.
And-
President. Sorry, Dr. Super. Dr. Davis. So, thank you for that. If I'm hearing you correctly, did a car hit the new fence? It looks pretty in this photo. Does that fence was not struck? So if I'm hearing it correctly, the first thing is that our police force, which is directly across the street from Sauk, asked us to remove the shrubbery so that they could have visual of the school, was maybe their primary concern, because we had bushes and then we had a fence behind that, and they wanted the bushes down so they could have a visual look through to the building for security purposes. Did I get that
That's
right?
true, but when we removed all of the beautiful shrubbery, then we saw that we needed another.
The fence needed to be fixed.
Yes.
Very good. And then the second thing I'm hearing you saying is that we're going to seek to put some, types of barriers so that vehicles, even though the fence is nice, it's not, they're not car catchers. And there's a lot of traffic on Sauk, a lot of different kinds of traffic and at high speed. So I'm very pleased to hear that we're proceeding with some type of, automotive barriers. Hopefully they can be decorative. There are different ways that they can put those kinds of things down that, and then also that we don't go right back and miss the whole point that the police wanted in the first place, which is still being able to see through. Also have a fence so people either stay on the sidewalk, or you mentioned the last time we were in a meeting, someone chose to hide on our property. This time that person will have to run all the way around the fence in front of the police station before doing any hiding. But also some kind of barriers for cars that jump the curb, pots, stones. There's lots of different ways these things get done. And I'm also excited to hear the county taking care of that. We've got a good relationship with the county, and they
I wanna
like to
thank
talk trail.
Commissioner Donna Miller, who responded immediately and has been working with us and the county.
Very good.
It's just, we will get there. We're relentless, and so is she.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
But back to cleaning, we have all of our buildings are ready for occupancy except for the Hooth. You're looking at the Hooth now. It's coming along, and one of the things that I shared with Mrs. Calvin and with Dr. Levy, who's here, this was a lot for us to do. The Hooth project is divided up 2 summers, but this involved taking down all of the bathrooms. And when they began to dig, they found out that there were problems that we did not know about that had to do with the plumbing. And so they just kept right on, but they went to 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. Now we're at 12 hours a day, and we're moving forward. But the intent was, the plan B was to bring the 8th grade here, and the 7th grade, we have room to house them at the Indiana. Since I announced that plan to the staff, or the plan B, we've now received permission and received permission to open in terms of the plumbing. We're waiting for the overall permit, which we anticipate would be this Friday. I think it's very interesting that the adults, we're in the building, but the permission is necessary to house children, not the adults. So, but we're moving rapidly in this direction. I think, Mrs. Calvin, it's going to be beautiful. It's already improved. The other thing that we were able to do there, in addition to the washrooms, all new doors, and you'd be surprised when you how new wood looks and how it makes you feel. I was extremely pleased with that. But I will email you on Friday and let you know when we receive the overall permit. But the plumbing has passed muster, so to speak, and the washrooms will be able to be used. But the annex, if we could, the annex is in process. It will not be ready for the opening of school, but we already knew that, because we withdrew staff and sent them to the Hoof to make sure that the school was open. And so our new date, we're looking at September 5th. All of the administrators here have been over. It's a huge, huge place. And at some point, we will all go. But I think the number that I was given, they can do 2,200 meals every hour. It's just a huge place. I would say that not the kitchen, but just the freezer is larger than my kitchen. So we're looking forward to that. But I did want to comment on Quest. For the past 2 days, I've been eating their food to see what it tastes like because they're bringing food from other facilities. We now are back to the capacity to have and the ability to have a salad bar. Our children actually love the salad bar. People think that they don't like vegetables and fruits. They do. They do. And so I'm happy with the taste of the food also, but I can't wait for our facility to open. Are there questions either about the Hoove, the annex, the cleaning, the anything? Oh, I do want to make one point about the cleaning. Historically, we have not, and I say historically, I mean the last 6 or 7 years, Mr. Walzak has hired young college students who are home for the summer, and we set goals with them about how much they're supposed to save. And so they've been the ones out there energetically painting, cleaning, doing all the kinds of things, and they just have done a magnificent job. So I do want to go on record thanking them. But now they're getting ready to go back to college, and so we anticipate being back with our own janitorial staff by next Monday because they are moving back. But we're thankful. But are there questions
Mr.
before I
President.
move on?
Just in regards to the annex, thank you for the report about that. I have had a question in terms of the revenue building, the commercial kitchen being a revenue builder, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Englert. At some point, it would be helpful to see maybe like a financial projection report of some sort so we can see how are we forecasting revenue and expenses and cash flow for that, just so that we can, even if it's not, complete and definite, just so that we can follow along with where we are on the journey of that.
Absolutely. Happy to provide that. So really, step one obviously is getting this done. This year is really just going to be District 162. And of course, ensuring with Southland. So there won't be revenue generated for this year. The second step of this process is really going to be this fall. And that is outreach to those other school districts who are interested in participating with us. So we anticipate probably around January, we would be ready to go out to bid. And we'd be going out to bid with those other districts. It would be District 162's bid, but we would be providing through intergovernmental agreement food to those other school districts. So once I know exactly how, what those numbers look like, I can give you concrete numbers. I can give you what I've estimated and the ranges I've estimated and be happy to provide that. But I can tell you, I've already had outreach from 3 districts and we haven't even put it out there yet. So just your word of mouth that they've heard about it. So, and want to come take a look. So that is really our next step in our focus this fall is identifying who are those good partners that we want to partner with to go out, do that RFP in January for the 24-25 school year. And really would be actually a multi-year contract, but it would start in the 24-25 school year. So yeah, happy to provide that.
Thank you so much.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I had a quick question, going back even to the handbook. Is this available electronically for the parents?
Yes, but Mr. Lice, is it currently online? Yes. Okay.
Fantastic. And then the second thing that I want to ask was in reference to, because I did see the car accident. I was just driving down, so I saw it. And then I also noticed that I guess the cage for the baseball on the baseball field is a bit warped. So if you go back, Brother Lights, could you go back to the picture with the fins? So that little cage over there, it's warped, like it's bent. So I just want to, I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but given the beautiful new fence, I think it would almost be, I would actually want to see something new, that's fixed there, because that just is an eyesore when it doesn't look good. So just want to bring that to your attention. And then the last thing, I had one more thing, but I can't recall it at this moment. So yeah, those are my two right now, but I did have one more question, but it was about something prior to, us talking about cleaning. But if it comes back, I'll see if I can engage it again.
We will look at that, not before Monday, but
Yeah, it's no rush. I just, the staff.
no, but if it's spent, it's.
You know, you said something about the wood in the, in the schools, and I'm so grateful to see what's going on at the hood. You know, students, they derive some pride from the schools they go to. It says something about the students, the spaces that they find themselves in. So when I bring up stuff like the sign sitting outside this building or, this, it's because I think this also reflects on who we are as a district. It's the small things. So the details are somewhat important to, well, not somewhat, they are important to me. So when I see small things like that, I'd rather just say something as opposed to just holding my tongue.
Thank you. If we could move on to cameras, Mr. Evans, I don't know if you will help us or not, but, we have finished putting our, security cameras in the Arcadia, the Huth, the Illinois, the Indiana, and the Madison. We have the Richmond Park and the Sauk to complete, but they will be, completed, prior to us opening, and, Mr. Evans is looking at that. If we could. What are we?
This is the Huth that we're looking at right now. And we have several shots, interior and exterior. And as Dr. Davis mentioned, we have two schools left. That would be the Richton Square and the Sauk to finish, and they're actively working on those schools all week to bring the cameras up. And hopefully by the end of the week, I'll have a final tally if they're going to be completed this week or next week.
But we met with, and I think I shared this previously, the police chiefs, and a year ago, their question to us was, what would we do if there was a challenge to our security? And so our reasons for putting in the cameras, Mr. Evans, and correct me, Mr. Evans, if I'm wrong, they can access this from their laptops, et cetera. What they wanted to be able to see is where are the intruders, what are they carrying, and all of the other things. So they've been given an access card to our schools because they had another, and I won't mention the name of the school, an issue, someone with a gun. And they indicated they would have to break down the door. Now, all they have to do is swipe noiselessly, because one of the things they indicated is that they would come without sirens because they don't want to warn whoever this might be that they're coming. But what is most important, we can see, the principals inside the school can see what's going on, but we can see this in real time and monitor. But the real reason that it was installed was at the request of the police chief. So they have been over here and they've been looking, and they're aware that we have this capability. So I'm happy about that. Should it be necessary? No, but it is. Questions about the cameras or anything from Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Okay, thank you. Performance objectives. You have a copy of the performance objectives for this year, and we won't discuss the last one because that is a balanced budget, and Mr. Englert has discussed that, and you know that how we allocate our funds is extremely important. So, but that is the goal. But going back and looking at the goals that are most important, you may think, why don't we have instruction as the number one goal? Really, our number one goal is the mental health of our children. And we spent a lot of time during the retreat, but Mrs. Dusky has been doing just a monumental job in terms of looking at the whole emphasis of trauma on our children. And we don't know how they'll come back to school this year, how they'll be feeling, but we did feel the influence of COVID and other things that might be going on in their lives last year. So the addition of counselors in our schools, social workers, psychologists to attest to the needs of the children, that's one aspect of it. But the training of Mrs. Dusky and others has been focusing on all of our teachers and everyone that comes in contact with the children. And so that is the first goal. The second goal has to do with instruction. And you will see that we have a goal of 10-point increase. You may think that that is a lot. Under normal circumstances, I think it would be. But because we've been looking for the past year at the learning gaps due to COVID, the pandemic, or however you want to phrase it, I think it's something that's doable by us this year. But I also wanted to point out how our staff development is focused, and we're really looking at four things. What is it we want our students to learn? And we've spent a lot of time on scope and sequence. We've also spent a lot of time in analyzing the impact of iPads and Chromebooks. And we want our teachers to emphasize direct instruction and to put down the Chromebooks and the iPads, because we don't think that that is the way that our children learn best. We also want to know how will we know if each student has learned what the teacher is presenting, and how will we respond when some students do not learn it. We're going back to after-school tutoring. We're going to small groups within the school. All of our schools have cadre teachers that are not assigned to a regular classroom that can meet with the children on a small group basis. In other words, we're going back to all of the things that were successful before and adding some additional things in because we see that they're necessary. We're also looking at one-on-one tutoring. There are some children that simply don't learn well in a group. And so looking at learning styles, I think we can safely say that all of us learn in a different way. And some children learn best if you are addressing their needs on a one-on-one basis. So we've been spending the last 3 or 4 months just analyzing how we teach, and the differences in how children learn. But we do see the gap or the insecurity that's there as a result of the pandemic and the way that we were instructing. And then finally, a group that we don't want to leave out of this discussion. There are some students that just proceeded on. They're doing extremely well. And so what is it that we're going to do to enrich their learning experience, because they're not at the baseline where the others are, that we owe them the same kind of experiences. So we have been looking at our gifted program, our advanced placement classes, and on. But these are the 4 points that drive what it is that we're doing, and will drive the staff development that the teachers will be involved with, not only on institute days, but on a monthly basis as we go forward. Still, as important as academics is, the multi-tiered system of support and the strategies that we're using. We did have some magnificent presenters that talked about trust and positive interaction and the way that we correct students so that we're not making them feel insecure. And I think all of that is extremely important. But I'd love to answer questions about the performance objectives, and if there's anything that you'd like to add or anything that I can elaborate on, I'm happy to do so.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I want to make very quickly, I want to make a comment about what you said about your higher performing students. Maybe in just this recommendation, if the students are showing mastery on specific content, maybe exposure might be a great thing. I know that we don't want to be unfair on what students get to go certain places and do certain things and get access to certain stuff. But if those students are already proficient and they have that mastery, then it might be, those exposure activities might be really cool. Going back to what you said earlier about the field trips and how that makes a difference for the learning of the little ones. But and I think about that in the context of equity. It may not be equal, but it might be equitable given the context of, what the students are doing and, their learning environment. And then the second thing I wanted to ask, and this is more of a general question, and it doesn't have to be answered here. How long do you think it would take us to get exemplary across all of our schools?
To get what,
Exemplary
I'm sorry?
status. So to get an exemplary status across all of our schools, how long do you think that would take us? And if there are things that are keeping us from being exemplary, do you have an idea of what those may be?
I do. I'm not sure that I'm prepared to address that now, but I would, from what I see, I think we're prepared to have 2 schools that would be exemplary in this coming school year. I would be surprised if they were not. But I certainly, we can prepare a total presentation of that. But
I
if
think
I
so.
had to answer, it would be student growth.
Yeah, I would think that maybe some goals that establish very specifically how we get to an exemplary status for all of our schools. Because the work is already excellent, it's already happening. But I just think that thinking a little bit more critically about this, or setting this particular goal, as, hey, we have this status that we're getting back from the Illinois, State Board of Education. And how do we play our cards in a way that puts us in the best position to be successful, given how they're judging us on our student outcomes. So that's something, I would love to see. But nothing that, there's no pressure because the students are already learning. This is already a very excellent district, and I know that from my own research. But I just wonder, given that status, and we don't necessarily talk about it as much, and now that we're on the other side of COVID, and maybe it's something to consider, just maybe.
But next week, we begin the presentation of our school and improvement plans by school. And there's not a reason that we can't add that question in. But I certainly am willing to share with the board either the entire plan by school or a synopsis. But that's a good question. But I truthfully would be surprised if 2 of our schools do not have an exemplary this year. But one of the scores would come out in designations in October. So we will see, but that's my opinion.
Mr. President. Dr. Davis, my question is for goal number 3. To answer these questions, do we have evaluation tools or assessments that have already been created in order to assess this?
These 4 questions have been guiding us for years, but in the last 3 to 4 months, there are questions that we spend a lot of time on. And these questions will be developed fully as each school gives their own school improvement planning plan.
Okay.
Starting next week.
So there's not like an assessment tool or instrument that every school uses to assess.
Oh,
it,
yes,
or-
but I'm not sure that that is sufficient. Our research indicates that we need multiple tools because it depends upon the child. I think you're aware that, and I'll just go back and give an example. You're familiar with the IGAP, the ISAT, and all of that. This district, if you looked at either of those tools, was always 70, 75. I think even the Arcadia might have hit 80%. Right, then we changed to Common Core standards and a different way of teaching math and English. Scores dipped probably 30 points from where we were with the IGAP and ISAT, particularly in math. And so each time that the tool changes, you see the child from another perspective. And so it's my belief that within the same school year, we should not be using just one tool, that we need multiple tools because you're looking at different aspects of the whole learning process. So that's what we're doing, not just one tool. But that was a culture shock when we saw when the state changed from the IGAP, the ISAT to the IAR, and you saw scores. What does it mean? And I had to come to grips with, does it mean the students don't know how to do what it is that we thought they did? Not necessarily, but one of the things that is important to us, and it's one of the things I'll be talking to the teachers about on Institute Day, vocabulary, because one thing about Common Core and the IAR, if you don't understand the question, how can you answer it?
Yeah.
That's an issue. And so we have to address it, but I am absolutely in favor of multiple forms of assessment. But yes, the district has always had that. But the other thing that we have to look at, does our assessment reflect how they're going to do on the state exam? That's why I want multiple forms of assessment, because that's a question. And usually the answer to that question is one does not predict success on the other, which means you have to be looking at different forms.
I think that's a great idea to have multiple assessments. I know also in the news in 2022, for the 2022-2023 year, there was a lot of talk about how Illinois scores dropped and plummeted in the wake of COVID.
That's true.
In 2023, do you know what the stats are, or does it show that Illinois in general, that our scores have improved? And how does our district fare in comparison to other schools and other students in Illinois?
Scores are still down. However, they have not released them officially yet. Generally, they release them on or before October 30th, and we would know. But I do know because we have our scores over the years. And if I compared us with 2019, which is the last baseline year we have before COVID, then I see the decrease in the scores from 2019 to 2023. So when I say 10 months, 10 points, I'm sorry, one of our goals would be that minimally, and I'm not sure that we can, some schools can do it in 1 year, but the goal would be to return to where we were, which was, we had spectacular growth in 2019. However, we do need to return to that. And the only way that we can do that is to have an aggressive goal. And so if you looked at us before 2019, probably we would have a goal of 3 or 4%. If we're going to look at this in terms of the life of a child, then we have to pick up the pace. We have to be more aggressive, and we have to analyze the what has not been learned and move forward. That is the reason that I'm looking at 10 points. If we were just going to do the 3 or 4 points, are we saying that children would be graduating from elementary school before we filled in those gaps? And I think that's unacceptable.
Thank you so much.
And Mr. President, to that point, I think it's interesting, maybe one of the tools that can be utilized, or we can construct the tool or create the tool, or maybe find something that's already out there, is a culturally relevant tool, because we have a very diverse population of students that's being taught here. And then the other thing is that I looked at the 5 essentials for Southland and I just, I think the 5 essentials are very interesting. Basis that, you know, they're providing. I don't believe in numbers. So I think that I think we have to we have to be innovative and maybe in-house come up with ways, either tools that have already been validated, or maybe construct some tools ourselves to measure our own growth and performance. And they may be adopted by other districts, you know, that have similar student populations, but I think that there's something that must be done, because if there's no correlation between what is happening on some of these assessments and then what's happening at this on these exams and standardized test score, then that's some miscommunication that's happening. So I think that we can be, you know, forerunners in this and come up with our own tools, and validate those tools, and then share those tools if necessary, but at least have our own tools to measure our own success and tell our own story about our students and what they're doing. Because we know, I think all of us know here, you know, at least if not in the classroom, because the teachers in the classroom were peripherally, you know, that our students are outstanding. And that they have outstanding instruction, you know, they have outstanding teachers, you know, and it's just, I just think that we can tell our own story, but it's something that, you know, it's not necessarily something that everybody does, but I think that we could do it. I think we have enough stuff in-house to come up with these tools, to validate these tools, to make sure that they're reliable, and to measure our own assess. And even if it doesn't, if it already does not correlate, if some of these tools that are already do not correlate with what's going on at the state, what's the harm? So we can tell our own story.
I think that's a good thing, Dr. Leatherwood, to tell our own story, but I also believe that the state, the world, that our students are leaving here and they're going out into a bigger picture, and that we must have scores that everyone recognizes in the big picture as being relevant. So
Yeah, I don't think that we negate that. I don't think that at all. And I know that some universities are moving away from, SATs, ACTs, all this stuff, But what I'm saying is that I think we're strategically positioned because of the high performance of our students and then the effectiveness of our administration to actually come up with tools that we can use to say something about what our students are doing in the face of what's also being said about us with these other assessment tools that necessarily don't speak to the cultural experiences or the educational experiences of the little ones that we have here. That's all. So it'll be an addition. I don't think we should ever, no, you have to live in the real world. Well, it's not just the real world, because that could be the real world too. You have to live in that world as well. You're going to transition out of this space, but when you're here, right, there are other ways for us to talk about how well you're doing, right? Like you said, every student learns different. And if we use one tool to measure how students are doing across their diverse learning capacities, that student that does better one-on-one than they would in a group setting, we're talking about them compared to students who that doesn't always seem, that may not always be fair. So I think that what we can do in addition to being very, very intentional about what is happening at the state is to come up with our own stuff so that we can give our students good feedback about where they are, what they're doing, right? And what they're producing in the classroom setting. But that's just me thinking out loud. It's not necessarily something that I see a whole lot of districts doing, but I'd imagine that we could do it because I believe this is the exemplar for all the other school districts in the nation who are really endeavoring to do excellence by students in general, but it's in particular this student population. So that's I think that it's a worthwhile endeavor, but it's something that I think we have to engage from a capacity perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Leatherwood. That concludes my report unless there are other questions.
We are fully staffed.
Dr. Hamilton, why don't you tell us where exactly we are, if you would, by staffing, please. We're close, but we're not. 162.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Based on the IRA data that we had,
Oh, that she's staffing.
on the staffing, where we're at right now in staffing is we're close to being full capacity. We're gonna put an ad in the paper. We're short some of the positions like a media specialist. We're psychologists, we're short, some special ed teachers we're short. But as far as the core curriculum gen ed teachers, we have virtually all of our gen ed teachers. We have one position at SAUC that we have interviews scheduled for that position. So I'm expecting that we will be close to full capacity by the end of this week. I think far better than most districts. I've been checking with other districts in terms of what you generally do is you call your colleagues and say, do you have any candidates for, let's say, a math teacher? And I can tell you it's been a resounding no. As a matter of fact, do you have any math teachers? So I wouldn't be calling you if I had math teachers, right? And so it ends up being that those are the areas, math, science, so and some of the specialties, but we're close. We're probably far better than most districts, and the staff that we have will all be fully licensed, which unfortunately many of the school districts are supplementing those vacant positions with full-time basis substitute teachers. And we're fortunate that we are not doing that. Everybody that we have is a part of either they're on the Roosevelt program, so they're will be licensed very shortly, and they're on a provisional license right now, or they have a full professional educator license.
To further comment on that, we would not be as close as we are without the Roosevelt program. If they had not indicated that they were working with the teachers on not only certification and the master's degree, then we would have been down 10 positions. The hardest position that we have to fill is the library position that's at the Indiana, which has been vacant for probably 2 years. People are not going into library science, they're going into media, and the certification has not changed. But I do anticipate that we will be able to fulfill the other positions, but we would not have if it wasn't for the presence of Roosevelt and the fact that that gave us immediately 10 teachers.
So again, that foresight and being able to look at current staff that we had and encourage them to be part of a professional education, Roosevelt University, to be able to be fully licensed, and they have taken classes over the summer and so on. So we fully believe that they will be able to provide quality instruction. There'll be mentorships, they're continuing to go into class. And so we feel that they'll be capable. On a personal note, I've had individuals for many years that had come through that type of program. And one of the things that I always did was compare how they performed on state assessments versus a regular professionally educated license. And I can tell you, with limited exception, they performed as well or better than teachers with the regular PEL. These are people generally made decisions to change course of their careers, and were really didn't make a decision at 18 years of age. They made a decision in their 20s that this is what they wanted to do, or 30s that they wanted to do. So there's a different commitment level when you're in your 20s and so on. You've already had a career, or at least looked at a career, and you decide this is where you want to be. So it has a whole different kind of twist to it with that.
And after they're done with this program, they're committed to us for 5 years.
I want to say 2 years after the completion of the program, yes, because we're paying for a portion of it.
Thank you, Dr.
Other
Bowman.
questions?
Any other questions from members of the board? Okay, let's resume our legislation. Dr. Davis, anything on legislation?
I'm just getting a chair that doesn't keep sinking, but the legislation that was passed, there are two relevant pieces. One, you heard a presentation, thank you, from Mr. Hall, and that is that we're now relevant is we purchased defibrillators this year, and the replacement defibrillators, we had a presentation, and I've always been a little skeptical. You know, my rule is call 911 and then we work on it, but we have to call 911 because we need the specialist. But I was very impressed with the presentation we had during retreat, where it actually talks to you and it tells you even when to give the shock or not give the shock, whether the shock, whether it will be helpful. It also tells you how much pressure and how many compressions you should have. We were also introduced to other forms of assistance with children, but the new law, and because that was the question in terms of legislation, all schools are to have trauma kits. We have tons of first aid kits, but we don't have a trauma kit, and the trauma kit, as described by the new law, simply has to do with stopping bleeding with the child. So now Mrs. Dusky and Craig are looking for trauma kits. Not that we don't have tourniquets within our kits, but this particular kit is mandated by law. So those are the two laws that were most important to us. But the legislature is not in session. They'll be back in the fall veto session, and we will see, but they're not in session right now.
Which is a good thing.
Pardon me?
Which is a good thing.
Well,
Mr. President, just a question, quick question about that. Who then is trained to use the defibrillators? Are those the nurses, school nurses?
all the gym teachers are, but Mrs. Dusky, who else is trained? I don't understand. I hope I don't have to do it.
Thank you.
Then the other issue, Mrs. Hutchinson, because you've seen lately the apparently young, healthy people who have had cardiac, they've seen this. And so we're redoubling our efforts to make sure that whenever we're playing any kind of sports, et cetera, that there is a nurse or trainer on site. That is an IHSA regulation, but whether or not it is adhered to is another question. And so we're thinking about what happens when our children go out and run track, what happens when they're cross country. And that's something that we've been looking at, even thinking about perhaps sending our own people, because we can never be sure what is going to happen. But that's an issue because you can't tell from looking at anyone. And you do know that the physicals that students take are really just baseline. They're not looking really whether or not they're organic kinds of issues and problems. And when they're out playing sports, I watched them today because we had an event at the high school level. I watched the young men, and it worries me. So we need to always have help immediately. But in this district, the first thing we do is call 911. Somebody's calling 911 while somebody else is holding the child, because I think both of those young men, and we know who they are only surviving because the trainers who were there had expertise above what it is I think that we have. So do we have them all around the building and all around all of our buildings? Yes, we do. But as we all watch this, and everyone here, I think we all had in our minds, we need help, because how do we know specifically what kind of a problem the child is having? But they also have EpiPens that talk to you. And so now we're in the process of purchasing that. Having said all of that, and making sure that our schools have all of those kinds of equipment, the most important thing is getting the best possible medical help for the students as soon as possible. So that's a part of our training, and that's what we're going to do.
And we will then go back to the rest of the agenda. New business. Is there a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President, approve the districts and superintendent's performance objectives for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray, Mr. Bean.
Aye. The objectives for the superintendent for the 2023-2024 school year have been adopted. Is there another motion, please?
Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve the extension of the superintendent's contract.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I just think that this is a momentous occasion. This takes us into the 25th or 26th year that the superintendent has been here. She doesn't want to hear this, but she began with us 21 years ago, and this contract will take us to 26, 27 years. And I just think that it just doesn't happen. You look around the region, and to find a superintendent who's been in place for over 20 years just doesn't happen. And I think that we are very favored and fortunate to have you and to have your expertise. And you got to hear this. So I know you don't like it, but you got here now. And I just think that we're fortunate to have you. And I think that this contract and the extension of 1 year is a reflection that the board feels that. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray, Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
The motion has been adopted. You're with us for an additional year.
Thank you, Mr. Bean.
They all think the same way.
They're just. Oh, Mr. Johnson.
If I could just have a moment, I'd take a break. Obviously, we knew this was going to occur. I just wanted to let the board know that the administrators that are here fully appreciate what Dr. Davis has done over the 21st year. And again, I think that's significant in itself. As I said last time, 20 years. I can tell you based upon what I know, is that very few superintendents ever last that long, let alone continue to be as visionary as Dr. Davis has been. So it's a tribute to what she's done that kind of forces us all to think differently, look differently, and be able to push forward. This administrative team that she has assembled are part of that vision that says we need to move forward every year. To stand still means you're behind. So as Dr. Leatherwood talked about visions that he would have, those visions become part of Dr. Davis's vision, and ultimately they become ours in a very short period of time. So it's a tribute to her that the board continues to recognize that her value, and certainly on behalf of the administrative team here, we've always recognized the value. So just to let you know, we're in accord with the board.
Thank you. And just further on that, I sit in the unique position of serving on 3 school boards. And at Speed, which is composed of 15 districts, I've been there for, well, maybe 20 some odd years. There is only one superintendent that's been there the entire time that I've been at Speed, and that's you. It's a series of revolving chairs, if you will, with respect to superintendents. They just they don't last for whatever reason, and so it's commendable that you're still here, and we still want you here.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
So I was asked to present the flowers on behalf of the faculty and staff and the board. I want to make a couple of remarks on behalf of personal remarks on my behalf. I don't have as much history, Mr. President, as you have, but I can speak a little to personal history from the Johnson
As
family.
old as I am, you can't.
The Johnson family came to this, relocated to this to Richmond Park because of this school district and the performance delivered by those of you here in this audience and under the leadership of you, Dr. Davis. So that attracted us here from the excellence of the schools that were here. All 3 of my children were educated by you all in front of us and under your leadership, Dr. Davis, and we were very pleased. It's just really hard to, when you talk about your own children, just to describe how how pleased we are with having entrusted all three of our children with you and how well you all took care of them. And then now it's, just kind of an honor to be able to serve on the school board to do my small part to give back and to work directly with you, Dr. Davis, as we move forward for the next generation of children. So congratulations thus far, and excited and looking forward to continue to work with you in the future.
Thank you. So, okay, next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business?
No, Mr. President.
Any board member issues or reports?
I think there's cake. I think there's cake.
I should hurry this up so you. get
Yes,
to your cake.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
I get it. Audience to visitors, any member of the audience who care to address the board on any subject whatsoever. Then we stand.